Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to today's webinar. I know we're getting started just a moment late. My apologies for the delay, but we will get started right away so that we have our full hour together today. Welcome, welcome. People are still logging in, of course, and joining our program, but I'm going to go ahead because I have a couple introductory remarks to share with you all today. Welcome to ASA Presents, the American Staffing Association's weekly webinar series. My name is Emily Lawson, ASA's Director of Learning and Development. You are here today for the webinar, Working with the Next Generation, How to Recruit, Hire, and Retain Generation Z. You will see at the bottom of your Zoom screen some controls. Here you can turn on and off closed captioning by using the live transcript button. And it looks like someone's already turned that on. Thank you so much. Two other buttons that I want to mention on your Zoom controls, the Q&A and the chat panel. For the Q&A button, this is a great place for you to submit any questions for Hannah today to answer. It's better to drop them into Q&A over the chat panel because if you drop into the chat, your questions may get lost. So just try to remember that as we move throughout today's program to use that Q&A panel for questions. And of course, the chat panel. This is one of our engagement tools for today's program. Feel free to share your thoughts, helpful links and resources for other attendees, perhaps your LinkedIn, or even just saying hello to others on our program today. You can use other engagement buttons as well. Thumbs up if you like something, for example. And in a moment, I'll drop the slides for today's program into the chat panel as well. Just wanted to let you guys know we are recording today's program, and that will be available for you on demand in the on demand section of ASA's website within 2 business days. If you join today to earn CE hours, the information for both ASA and SHRM credentials is here on your screen. ASA certified individuals, CE for our live webinars is now automatically applied to your status, so you no longer need to submit hours from today's program. And speaking of continuing education, I want to quickly highlight 3 new credentialing programs that are now available through ASA. Our Staffing Pro Stacks in recruiting, sales, and leadership. These are self-paced programs that contain 9 lessons taught by industry subject matter experts. You can learn more on the website on your screen. And for those of you on today's webinar, we're offering 40% off. So use the code 40WebPS at checkout. This is a huge savings and a great benefit, so make sure you jump on this offer while it lasts. And now I am delighted to introduce our presenter today. Hannah MacDonald is the managing partner of Better Together Group. Her goal is to connect employers that are looking for support to the employees they need, connect employees who are looking for roles to the employers that want them, and then finally connect people with information that will help them make the best decisions they can for themselves as they work through their careers. So welcome, Hannah. Thanks so much for being with us today. The mic is now yours.
Thank you so much, Emily. I am so excited to be here with all of you guys. Let me get my screen shared here and we'll get ready to go. Oh man, I imagine some of you are going, wow, it's Tuesday, post-Labor Day weekend. I can't believe we've made it to 2 o'clock. And some of you are feeling very refreshed. So if you're refreshed, I'm happy to have you. If you're on the other side and you're dragging your way through it, I really appreciate that you made it to this. This is going to be really fun and we're going to work through this together. Generation Z is something I am incredibly passionate about. And it's going to be a great chat. But the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, and this is kind of funny, I know everybody has them, the other screens in their office, in their home, whatever it is, whether it's the TV that is next to you, if it's the second monitor on your computer, if it's your phone, I ask you today just to put it down. It's going to be a little funny. It's more important for me to ask you to do it than it is for you to do it, but we'll get to why that is and what that means in a little bit. We're going to talk today about Generation Z, a roadmap to a bought-in generation. What has your experience been like with them? Perhaps you see them from a distance and you're just kind of observing and you don't really understand who they are or what they're about or why they do what they do. Maybe you're working with them in a professional setting. Maybe you're managing one, maybe you're working alongside of one, maybe you're in meetings with one. Perhaps they're using language that you don't understand, or perhaps they are doing things that doesn't make any sense to you. Maybe you're a parent or a guardian or an aunt or an uncle or a sibling or a family member who has a loved one who is in this generation, and you're just like pulling your hair apart because what the heck do they do? What is this? Well, Generation Z, they are born between 1997 and 2012. There are 72 million of them. They're known as the Centennials, the Zoomers, the Rainbow Generation, Generation Solo. They go by lots of names, but today we'll refer to them as Gen Z. I am so proud to be one of them, and I'm so excited to talk to you a little bit about who they are. But the first time I was putting this presentation together, someone came up to me and they were like, "Hey, Hannah, come talk about this generation. You have a voice of this generation. Come and say something." And I was like, "Okay, well, what is it that you want me to say?" And they were like, "Well, we actually don't know. We were hoping that you would say and tell us that." So I was like, "Okay, let me figure this out." So I went to a Starbucks and I sat down for 8 hours. And every single person that passed me in the Starbucks, I said, "Hey, let me ask you a question. What's the first word that you think of when you think of Generation Z?" And this is the list of words that I got. There are some really good ones on here. We've got open, stylish, that's fun, opportunists, savvy, talented. We've got some not so fun ones like screwed. We've got gurus. We've got anti, that was into antisocial. Really, typically, that's the one that was used. Lazy. So we've got some good words and we've got some hard words to work through, but everyone's got good and everyone's got bad. So we'll work through all of these together. But you might be thinking, "Hannah, this is cool, but who are you exactly? And why are we here listening to you talk?" So let me explain my story very, very briefly before we dive right into it. So I am a Gen Z. I originally started my university degree from Liberty University, and I did an online program before online programs were cool, pre-pandemic. I was at the school, didn't love it, transitioned home, lived at home, worked full time, was like, what am I gonna do? I had so much money saved up. I was so excited. I was halfway through my degree and I was like, I am going to move from Toronto, which is where I was born and raised, to Florida because I could. So I found this random person online who I had never met before. And I said, "I'm going to move into your house." And she did a little walk tour through of her home on FaceTime with me. And I was like, yeah, this stranger, this sounds like a good idea. So I moved to a different country. I started wakeboarding competitively. I fell in love with it. It was so much fun. I was working as a student teacher. I was at schools, working through high schools, elementary schools, middle schools. I fell in love with high schoolers. Absolutely fell in love with them. They are so funny and so smart and so driven and so different than anybody that I really understood before. These new teenagers, this next generation, they're so different. But I was astonished by how few things they could really apply to the working world. And so I kind of set forward on this mission as COVID crash landed and my degree came to an end, to move back to Canada and move in with my family. I got my own place. It was great. I was actually the first woman in my entire lineage to live alone. So that's really exciting for me. Chose this new path in the midst of COVID. I was originally living in Florida, right? There was a border in between us. There was a 14-day isolation required every single time that you pass that border. So I was like, Canada. I was working in the family business. And as I was doing it, I was working alongside a lot of people that looked nothing like me and were much, much older than me. And we lived completely separate lives. And I was like, love these people. They're fantastic human beings. But I have nothing in common with any of them. They're at least double my age. And so I was working in the family business and trying to love it, desperately trying to love it. And one day I was driving down the highway, commuting into work. So driving an hour down the highway in the middle of the winter. And as I was driving, I was bawling my eyes out, just crying so hard, so desperate. Because I looked over at my glove box and I saw it sitting there on the right side. And I was like, I know that my passport is in that glove box. I know that I could drive to the border. If I just go 4 more hours, I could get across the border. I could cross it because I had been doing that in the middle of the pandemic, even though you weren't supposed to. Don't tell anybody. But I could go across, I could get there. I could be in the US, I could leave my family behind, I could leave my apartment behind, I could leave my job behind and just say, I'm so sorry, I'm not strong enough, I can't do it. But I didn't. I stopped the car, I got out, and I went to work. But I did it because my last name was on the door. So why do your Gen Zs stop when they're in that place? You know, well, that's what we're going to learn today. But before we do, I think it would be much more fun to start a game. So Emily, if you could share with us the polls. Here we go. Fantastic. Oh, in 2025, what percent of the workforce do you think is going to be Gen Z? You can take a guess. Is it going to be 12, 27, 52, or 18? We'll give it just a couple of seconds here. We got some guesses on 12, some guesses on 27. Okay, let's see, a couple more. And then do I just click here, end this poll? So we'll see. So
Hannah,
the
I've
most,
actually got them all going at the same time. So the attendees
oh,
can see all 7 of your questions if you want to continue.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. I might have ended that. You might have to refix that. I'm sorry about
Oh,
that.
well then 1 second. Let
So
me relaunch. We
we'll just
got this.
we'll just keep rolling then.
Sorry, everyone. We'll try that over again.
So in 2025, the percent of the workforce is going to be 27%, which is crazy because 2025 is, I don't know if you've noticed, way closer than it should be. It's insane. It's coming up so fast. So 27% of your office, 27% of the workforce that you're communicating with should be Generation Z. What's the next one? How many hours a week does Gen Z spend on their phone? Let's look at some of these. We got lots of guesses for 22, more guesses for 55. We've got a bunch of guesses for 45. Let's see, what is this answer going to be? It's 45 hours a week. So I know that we all work in staffing. And when you work in staffing, you work many more than 45 hours a week. But for the average human, it is 45 hours a week. The average salaried job is what they are spending on their phone. That's so interesting. I wonder what that means. I bet we'll learn later. What percent of Gen Z says that technology affects their decision to work for a company? Let's see, we got most of the guesses at 72 here. Those are great guesses, but it is 91%. So 91% of them, most of them, that is like not 100%, but just about getting there. Almost all of them are saying that technology is going to affect their decision to work for a company. And we'll talk a lot about this and what technology actually means and how you can really be using it and what that looks like. What percent of Generation Z says that there's a better way to get an education than a post-secondary degree? Most of you are saying 92% here. Let's see. It is 73%. Holy smokes. That's crazy. 73% of them are saying there's a better way. And we'll learn all about why that is in a little while. What percent of Gen Z is sexually fluid? Now I'm going to give you the definition of this. Sexually fluid is the idea that someone's sexuality can be changed over time or in a different situation. And this one, most of you might be like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? What are we talking about? Lots of you said 35% and might be shocked to know that it is 48%. So nearly 50% of them, nearly half of them are saying this. And we'll talk about what that means for us in a little bit. What percent of Gen Z say they care about their own longevity at a company? This one is always so interesting to me. So we've got 90, most of you are saying 15%. It is 90% of Generation Z that say that they care about their longevity at a company. But let's break that down a little bit more. Maybe they're just saying that they understand that they know that it's important, but they're not saying that they actually want to stay. You know, maybe it's just blowing smoke and mirrors. So what percent of those exact Gen Zs say that they also want to stay at their current company? Let's see, most of us, there was a split here between 30 and 17, and the answer is 70%. So 70%, that's crazy. That looks a little different than what we have understood to be our Gen Zs before. So we'll get into all of these stats and talk about what all of those mean for us. I apologize, I'm gonna take quite a couple sips here. I'm trying to deal with a cold, but we'll keep moving. So this story time, I got out of my car, right? And I went to work and I showed up and I came back day after day after day after day. And things started to change. I started to talk to my father, who is phenomenal, and say, hey, this isn't working for me. And this isn't working for me. And this also is not working for me. And here's why. And he is a phenomenal man, and being the human that he is, he said, great, let's try and change some of things. So we sat back, and not everything I said he wanted to change, which I completely understand. I was a 20-year-old at the time. What did I know? But apparently a couple of things, because as we started to implement some of these changes, we started to change as an entire organization. Our culture completely pivoted. We got a new staff. We had a lot of staff that stayed and remained and were phenomenal. And then we had some new staff that came in that really brought energy and excitement to the group. That was so fantastic to see every single day. And it's funny, actually, you can see up on here a picture of Staffing World. Staffing World was a pivotal moment in my career. I came to a Staffing World right after moving to the US. I had moved to the US because I had fallen head over heels for somebody and was getting more serious with them. So I moved back to Orlando, Florida after I had been living in Canada. But some of those changes and some of the things that we had heard at Staffing World allowed my father to see some different value that he had never seen before, which allowed us to expand into the US and into some new markets, different borders, creating a completely different organization than it had looked like previously. And that led me to the place where I was finally able to start speaking on stage and talking to people just like you about how this happened. And this was all so fun and dandy, and it seems great, but what does this mean for any of you? Nothing. I don't have stats to prove it, right? So let's just chat a little bit about all the Gen Zs that we had come in. We ran programs for interns for, I want to say, 3 years. We still have some of them, and we still do that program. I literally, right before this phone call, just got approval to bring on another new, she's actually returning. So another old new Gen Z who's coming back for another semester, which is so exciting. But they finished their first term with us, and 90% of them finished. Okay, so not everybody makes it in staffing. We understand that. And then out of that, 70% of them were like, hey, let's come back. Let's learn more. There's more here for me to come back to. I'd love to be a part of this. And then 25% of them came back for a third semester. And all 25% of them that came back for a third semester were offered a full-time job and hired on full-time. So we've done okay at this. And I just show you that to kind of back some of the things that we're going to talk about. But remember when I first started the presentation, I said, hey, find that other screen and put it away for me. I imagine a lot of you felt uncomfortable by that, a little off-put by that. And perhaps, as you should, because you are busy professionals. You are staffing professionals. You've got emails and meetings and text messages and people trying to get in contact with you all day. But why I said it was not as important for you to do what I am telling you to do and more important for me to tell you to do it is because oftentimes what happens with Gen Zs is we think we know what's going on, and we come in and we tell them to do something before we first actually take the opportunity to understand who they are and why they're doing what they are doing. So that's why I explained that to you, because first we are going to take a moment to understand who Gen Z is and why they do what they do. So if you have that text message you have to respond to, by all means, don't let me hold you back. Technology. They have been completely altered and shaped by technology in a way that no other generation will really understand because it advanced at such a time for them that it looked so different when they were infants. And then as soon as they were growing into their baby adolescence, which is like what I like to call their 18, 19, 20, 21 years. So their baby adolescence, as they have grown into that, it is shaped and looked very different. So they're spending 45 hours a week on their phones. Like I said, the same what you do at work, what I do at work, maybe a little bit less than, maybe a little bit more than. And then 91% of them say that it affects their decision to work for a company. And so I bring this to you to explain to you that technology is not a tool that they're using. It is actually a part of their body. And so this is very funny for most people to try and understand. And so let me explain this. Most people use this as a tool, right? I can make phone calls in it. I can send emails on it. But rather, a lot of Gen Zs experience it as a part of their body. So this holds all of my contacts, all of my memories, has all of my photos, all of my appointments. And while I would love to be able to manage all of that up here, I do not have that capability. And so I let it flow through here. And a lot of my coworkers who are not Gen Zs, they have the ability to hold a lot of information. Their memories are honestly a lot better than a lot of Gen Zs because they've experienced a period of time where that hasn't been a piece of their body. But Gen Zs experience technology as a body part. And so that's kind of the funny difference between Gen Zs and tech. But what does that mean for you, right? As their employers, like what does that mean for you? Why do you want to bring them in if this is how they see technology? Well, as an entire generation, they all have this new knowledge and they are all coming forward with it at the same time. And that has never happened before, that an entire generation all holds the exact same skill. So that's really exciting. They'll come forward with an understanding and ability how to use tech. So that's exciting because they'll be predisposed to adopt the technology that's in your organization right now. Yes, the CRMs, the ATSs that you're using today, but then also the ones that you implement in a year from now and in 2 years from now. And alongside of that, they'll be really helpful at supporting the other generations in your building who are not as excited to do the exact same things. And so we've seen that time in and time again, people, just Gen Zs who are happy to sit down and walk through something with somebody who is older than them and of a different generation who isn't as predisposed to adopt it as they are. So I just set a meeting up like that last week with one of my Gen Zs and one of my I don't want to presume her generation. She's not a Gen Z, but she's struggling with her iPhone. I was like, hey, this person, she loves it. She sits down, she plays with her settings at night when she's bored watching Netflix. Why don't you sit together? So you can understand that's about them. You can use this to your best advantage. And alongside of this, I also want to mention the YouTube DIY part. So because they were raised through this generation where all of this information is accessible to them through the technology that's been there, they have also been able to learn and do anything at the little, oh gosh, I don't know the right words for this, at their fingertips. So for example, one of my friends, when I was a kid growing up, when I was 14 years old, she said, hey, Hannah, I really want to learn how to build a house. And I was like, Laura, you're 14 years old. What do you mean you want to learn how to build a house? She's like, well, I did the little pockets. I did it with the duct tape. I did all of the arts and crafts I could possibly come up with. I've gone through YouTube as many times as I can, and I'm kind of over it. So now I think I want to build a tiny house. And I was like, okay. And so she sat and she went through YouTube for 4 years and she built a tiny house that she lived in with her husband and her first child. And then they sold it and they got a down payment for their first house. And people like to tell me that this human is different, that she's special. And she is special, she's unique, she's fantastic. But she is actually your average Gen Z. So technology has completely shaped and changed them. And they're so different for so many reasons. And that's going to change how we manage them. But what else? Globalization and human cooperation. So social media is a little piece of this technology. And this is why it's so important that we learn, because we want to grow and pull it all the way through. But technology has shaped the way that we can see and understand everything going on in the world around us. And this has created very different employees than we have ever seen before. It's created outside of the box thinkers. It's created amazing building relationships. They're great salespeople. They're great customer relationships people. And they really want to build those long distance relationships and maintain them for a really long time. And so you'll see and hear this through a little bit more of my story shortly. But then COVID. I don't love talking about COVID as much anymore because it is a piece of the past. It was almost 5 years ago now, which is crazy. But it was this massive life-changing event for them as they were growing into their baby adulthood. So 90% of them say that Gen Z cares about their longevity at their jobs. And 70% of those Gen Z say that they want to stay at their current company. Now, understanding that COVID happened as they were high school, late middle school, and graduating university, kind of that's the age group that they were in. So they weren't young school kids anymore. Some of them were old, and then some of them were still maturing through. But then also, they're now experiencing this recession that is happening. And pre-pandemic in their childhood, they also experienced the last recession. So based on the ages that they were as these things hit, they watched their parents get scared, and they watched their parents pull back and really lean into what was comfortable and confident. Whereas millennials, who were just a little bit older than them, had a different edge of the concept of what people often refer to as the rebellion cycle. So they were seeing this and they were rejecting what was going on. Whereas Gen Z is experiencing accepting it for what it is and trying really hard to work through it and bear down. So this has really changed and shaped the way that Generation Z is going to experience and crave their career moving forward, and why we're seeing that 90-70 pivot. Whereas millennials, we saw the grass is greener on the other side as a massive intake. And I don't have that stat, but I should. So if you're interested, find me. I'll figure it out for you and send it to you later. But again, what does this mean for you? So they're craving that longevity, that stability. They're very self-motivated, but then also think about they weren't kids when the pandemic happened. So they were doing decent work. They were doing decent studies by themselves at home. So they're going to be more self-motivated. They're going to be driven. They're going to be more organized. They're going to be able to carry that desk, whatever desk it is that they're holding forward, in a way that's more manageable than some other generations before them. But as we look at this list, we've got all these amazing pros, and then we've also got some of the cons, because everybody's got pros, but everybody also has cons. And so there are barriers that we're going to see with this generation as they come forward. And what are we going to do as the staffing professionals around them to help them work through it? Well, let's understand. So you've got communication of values, imposter syndrome, flexibility, and educational change. Communication of values. This is the fun one that everybody's excited because they're so interested to see what this means. 48% of Generation Z considers themselves to be sexually fluid. And I don't share this stat with you. It's kind of funny. Typically, when I'm sitting in a room with people, I understand how this is landing. I don't share this with you to get crazy shock value. I don't share it with you so that you're confused by any stretch. I share it with you to show you that this generation is very different than the generations that have come before them. And the things that they are valuing are very different than the things that we have seen prior. And so what I share this to say is to ask you to be really, really intentional about the words that you're using when you're communicating with them. Because if you communicate with them in a way that distracts them from the message that you're actually trying to deliver, it would be really unfortunate for something that you thought to be funny or witty to distract them from doing the job that they've actually showed up to do. Right? So we just want to be really careful about the way that we're communicating with them and what we're putting into the messages that we're truly trying to deliver, understanding the words that come out of our mouth are not always the words that go into their ears. So I'll move on from this. We don't need to gripe on it. But imposter syndrome. So 70% of people struggle with imposter syndrome. And I'm gonna describe it for you. Imposter syndrome is an experience of intellectual or professional fraudulence. So, for example, let's say I was experiencing imposter syndrome right now. I was like, if people are, they think that I'm a cheat. They don't think that I know what I'm talking about. They think that all of those numbers are fake. They're not. I'm not thinking this, but that's an example of what it could be. And luckily, I'm not thinking this because I had that self actualization moment at Staffing World all those years ago. I wish I knew her name, but she helped me change how I understood imposter syndrome. And what she explained to me, she was in the female group before the actual Staffing World started. But she was explaining to the room that imposter syndrome should be seen as a warning light, as something that is telling you, yes, you are trying something new. Yes, this is something scary. Yes, you should be aware that what you are stepping into is outside of your current level of comfort, and be, again, intentional about what you're doing moving forward. But it does not mean that we can stop what we are doing. And so 70% of people struggle with imposter syndrome. And I am so sad because Gen Z actually wasn't supposed to be a part of this 70% because of the way that technology has backed us, because of the way that we should be able to say, hey, I checked that on ChatGPT. We weren't supposed to experience this. But because of the way that the pandemic happened and the way that we have missed so many fundamental experiences, we do experience a lot of imposter syndrome. And so it's our responsibility as their employers to step behind them or step beside them and say, hey, this doesn't mean you stop. This means you're aware, but you continue to move forward. So they're going to experience this. And sometimes people say, well, what does this look like? What does that mean? My favorite example to give, and I'm embarrassed because I really need to do this very, very soon. It is a reminder every time I step on stage. But I don't like sending pieces of mail. I've never had to do it before. I've never had to send a piece of mail. And my husband and I, we got married really quickly. We didn't send out mail to invite people because it was too short notice. But I am sending my thank you cards, and I am getting scary close to a year of not having sent them, because genuinely putting the stamp on the piece of paper and putting it in the mailbox scares me, because I have no assurance that I will be able to actually carry that forward and it will get to them, because I was raised with an experience of sending a message directly and immediately and responding and hearing that the person got that message. So this is such a funny, simple example that I need to fix. But your Gen Zs are experiencing this in every way, shape, and form. So maybe it's, what do I wear to the interview? Maybe it's, what do I wear to my first day? Where do I put my lunch? How do I ask to go to the bathroom? My gosh, there's going to be a lot of things that they don't really understand that we can help and stand next to them and walk through with them. Now, flexibility. Every generation has their thing, their thing that they're going to stand on, every generation. And for Gen Zs, it will be flexibility. Now, it'll be flexibility because of the way that they were raised with technology and because of what happened in the middle of the pandemic. So through COVID, all Gen Zs were sent home. They were said, work at your house, work in your basement. You can do it on your computer. You can do it in your house. And for a year, for a lot of them, or more years in Canada, I know the US was very different. In Canada, where I was from, we were stuck online for 3 years. And so we were told that you can do this. You can go be flexible. You can go solve this. And we have been trained as a generation to be a flexible generation. And we've been trained to be flexible from our authority. Sorry, guys, my dog, Charlie. Hey, let's be nice. Let's not do that. Sorry, guys. So they've been trained as an entire generation to be flexible and from their authority. So when their authority comes to them and says, hey, no, we can't be flexible. I need you in the office 5 days a week. I need you here from 8:30 until I leave. It's going to make them a little frustrated because that's not what their experience has been. But what I want everybody to understand is that the definition of flexible is actually really flexible itself. You see, I used to be our sales and marketing manager because when I was first coming into the business, when I was first learning what was going on, I was interested in sales. I was good at sales, but I loved marketing and I thought it was really fun. And so for me, I was able to do the thing that was good, to do the thing that was necessary, to do the thing that brought money in and served the purpose of what needed to be done. But then I was also given this other piece, not that marketing doesn't allow for all of those things as well, but that was more interesting and entertaining for me and less just about driving. And now I understand all Gen Zs come in with a purpose. Every human is hired with a purpose. And I don't want you to say that you have to completely rewrite everything so that they get to be happy. That's not what we're talking about here. But we can be a little flexible with what we are talking about. So maybe this means that we give them 2 hours a week. Maybe it means they get to work from home once a week. Maybe it means they get to start work at 4 a.m. because they have a health issue that when they start to do something, they wake up and they're awake, and then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're exhausted by the end of the day because they've already been awake for so long, and we just get to start them earlier, you know? So the definition of flexible is completely flexible and up to you, but I do ask that you start to make it a part of the conversation. Now, educational change. 73% of Gen Zs say that there is a better way to get an education over going to university. And this is really hard for most employers to swallow because the generation prior to them, the millennials, were the most educated generation to date. And so this is a completely different shift and so separate from what we as employers have understood. So we really need to be aware and understand that moving forward, it's going to mean that we need to switch and pivot a little bit that's going on. 66% of them say that they worry greatly about accumulating student debt. Remember how we were talking about the pandemic followed by the recession? They're pretty scared. Honestly, they're coming forward into this environment and they don't really know what to expect. So when they're not sure how they're going to move out of their parents' house before they're 30, when they're not sure if they'll ever be able to purchase a home, if they're not sure if they'll be able to afford all of their groceries this week, it's going to be hard for them to say, yeah, let me go to school because that makes sense. When they have all of that information that is accessible but not credible online. And so what does that mean for us as employers? That means that we get to help create some credibility for them for the work that they can do, because they can come forward, they can learn a lot, and they can do amazing things before they get to us, even if it has nothing to do with a certificate on the wall. And so we can help them create this credibility through other things like portfolios. Why is it that artists have portfolios and not welders and carpenters? Why is it that our 310T mechanics don't have portfolios where they can show work and explain what has been done? Why is it the red seal that is required for all of these trades? Or you can take that concept and pull it across any industry you want. You can create a portfolio. Now, I understand there are some things that we can't do that. I want my brain surgeon to go to school. But if we can think about places that we can create additional and better credibility for them, why would we not? So we've talked about all of this and it's so fun. But what does it mean for us now? What do we do moving forward? I'm going to ask you to mentor over manage them. This whole thing is really leading to this. It's what do we do with them once they get through our door, once they stay in our building? To mentor over manage them, it's important to understand this one concept, that most Gen Zs have built up this really, really big wall. And it's funny, I was on a podcast a couple of days ago and someone asked me, they said, hey, Hannah, do you think that this generation has built a bigger and thicker wall than the generations before them? Because 20-year-olds, they're growing up, they're maturing into their careers, they're gonna have some rub against other generations, regardless of the generation that it is. But specifically, Generation Z, he's seemingly struggling to connect with, and he feels like this wall is really big. And what I explained to him is that I personally do think that it is much bigger than any generation prior, because as a generation, they have completely redefined the concept of influencers. As technology has advanced, influencers have changed the entire game, and they have been influenced from the moment that they were kids. The first time I got social media, I was in 6th grade. And I haven't had a day since then that I haven't been influenced at least multiple times a day, if not every hour on the hour, by somebody around me. And so as a human, I have taken all of these blocks and I've built them up so that every single influencer who comes up around me can, yes, do the thing that they are being paid to do. Yes, do your job. Try and influence me. But I'm not going to allow you to, because I have built this wall that protects me. And so I want employers to stand there next to the wall and brick by brick start to take it down. Because if we first start to talk to them before we understand them, what good is that going to do, right? So mentor over manage. But what does that really look like? I'm asking you to listen to learn to understand, and then to understand to speak. Sorry, guys, I just hit my mic. I don't know if that was so loud in your ears. Listen to learn to understand, and then understand to speak. And that last step, I wrote in there the very first time because I struggled to remember it myself. And it's really important. Like I said, you know, that Gen Z that comes in there, you're so excited, you've done that job, you want to teach them, you're like, let's go. And you start to tell them exactly what they need to do. But we have not first asked them how they're doing or how it's going or what they need at all. And so listen to learn to understand, and then understand to speak. Then I really want you to integrate their why. And you know, the first time I started this presentation, I called all of my Gen Zs and I said, hey, why is it that you do what you do every single day? And one of them said, because you told me to. And I was like, haha, I understand. But most of them said something along the lines of, because I have the opportunity to make a difference. Because I get to connect with people when they're most vulnerable, and I get to stand beside them and support them. Because I get to create opportunities for people who wouldn't be able to create them for themselves. Because I get to work alongside of candidates and communicate with employers who wouldn't have had a bridge between them otherwise. And I was sitting on the other side of this phone like, are you guys sure you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old? This is crazy. But we were able to work with them. We were able to show them what to do. And then we were able to show them why they were doing what they were doing, which made such a difference. So I want you to integrate their why. I want you to invest in them. And this sounds so funny to a lot of employers. They're like, why would I invest in my Gen Zs? They just come in because they have to get me coffee. Or they just come in because they have to do the filing or the calls or send the emails. I understand that there's a job that must be done. But also, if we invest in ourselves, if we invest in our customers, if we invest in our senior management, why is it not that we would take the time to invest in the next generation of employees who would one day take our seats while we still have the opportunity to influence them from where we are today, right? So I ask you to invest in them, bring them to stuff like this. Then I want you to feed them something yummy. Again, I get they have the job to be done. But personally, I don't like eating crap every day. If I meal prep and I really put some work into it, sometimes I can get 5 days through. But I need that weekend meal, that cheat meal, to know that it's coming, to be excited. So I want you to dangle something really yummy in front of them. And I want you to feed it to them at least once a week. Give them something that they can be genuinely excited to show up about. You know, my marketing desire piece, that started 2 hours a week on Fridays when I was first came into the business. It was very small. It was really minute. And now we get to give it to other people as their something yummy, which is so exciting and fantastic. But give them something that at least can get them excited to come in. And then after all of this is finally done, this is when we finally have taken all of those bricks down and we can ask them to listen to us. This is when we can invite them to the table. We can say, hey, come learn, come listen, come be involved, come get better. And this is when they'll be so excited to not only do it, but get as involved and learn as much and help you as much as they possibly can. So that's kind of the formula, you know. This is really all just leaving them better than we found them. Again, we do this with our customers. We try to leave them better than we found them. We do this with ourselves. We try to be better than we were the day before, you know? Why would we not do it with the Gen Zs, who will one day be in these seats? So we've got all of these barriers, you know, the communication of values, the imposter syndrome, the flexibility, the educational change. But they hold nothing to us as an industry. We can all work through them very easily and create a really great collaborative relationship. So typically, we won't do this, but typically right now, what I'll do at the end of this presentation is I'll say, okay, everybody stand up with me, get up and stretch, and the whole room gets up and everyone's so excited. They're like, woo, we're done. And I say, okay, so exciting. We're so pumped. Energy's high. Boomers, sit down. All the boomers sit down. And I ask the silent generation to sit down at the same time with them. And I say, hey, Gen X, sit down. And now I say, millennials, sit down. And then we look at the room around us and we say, if by 2025, 27% of the workforce is supposed to be Gen Z, how do you guys think we're doing right now? And that kind of just helps set the pulse to go back, because we're not quite there yet. We need to bring more Gen Zs in, and we can do it just like this. So if you're looking for help finding a Gen Z, if you need one, I know you guys are great staffing professionals, but if you want to set your program up, look at your Gen Z program, look at your intern program, whatever that is, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to help you out. But additionally, beyond that, I would love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. So that's a QR code you can scan there to connect with me on LinkedIn. And then the two on the right, I have a couple books I just want to share with you. My first and favorite book is Well Shit. This is a book I'll show you guys so you can see the cover. She's my favorite. She's a memoir, very boomer endorsed. This was written for the next generation, for Gen Zs. I originally created it as something I could give to my kids one day, as all of the lessons that I've been learning as I've been coming into my career that have really kind of helped me shape and pivot it the way that it has needed to. There's actually a story about Staffing World in there. That's a funny little plug for you. But I had a phenomenal experience, wanted to put it down, gave it to my kids. So that's what it is. It's a great card for somebody who's graduating high school or university and they're like, well, crap, like, what do I do now? This is for them. It's the best card you can give them. And then I've got a couple others I'll share very briefly with you. You can find them on Amazon. I've got an employee guide about how to get a job. So you can find this just employee guide on Amazon. It's all for how to get a job. It is how to create an application, how to dress when you're going into work, all those wonderful things. And then the final one is all about intentionality, integrity, and intensity, the three things that we talk about at the Better Together group of companies and how to find them in your employees. This one you can also find. All three of these can be found on x2z.org as PDF downloads, and the Welsh shit will get sent out. Emily will make sure it gets sent out from everybody, so you guys can all have it. But I'm so excited to dive into questions. That's the thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
QR,
Hannah.
the
Yeah, the
QR is
QR code. I was just
massive.
going on LinkedIn to try to grab your
Good to
link to
know.
send out
I
to
will
everybody.
get links and have them sent out from Emily, but you can find me on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
Hannah Dannecker or Hannah MacDonald-Dannecker. And then I'll have the links for everybody later. Thank
there
you
we
for
go. I
that.
just dropped it in the chat. People connect with you that way. And then, like Hannah said, I'll include that in our follow-up email. So you
Yeah,
can all connect with her after the program as well. And I did also share your book, a PDF of it, in the chat panel for
perfect,
people to download and access. All
perfect.
right, so
After
let's
my
see. Yeah,
favorite part, question.
questions.
Does
And
anybody
feel
have?
free to type those questions into the Q&A panel. We've got some time left in today's program, so send them in. We do have a couple that have come in already, so let's see. Our first one, Hannah, do you feel like there is a bigger wall between this generation gap? Gen Z to the rest, millennials, boomers, Gen X, so on and so forth. How are the
Yeah,
gaps?
that's funny. That must have come in right as I was starting to talk about that wall. But yeah, absolutely. As I was describing, it's really interesting. can't speak for generations prior to mine. Of course, I am Gen Z, so I don't know what it was like to be a boomer trying to connect with a millennial, or a Gen X trying to connect with a millennial, or any of the other variations. But there is definitely this wall standing between people that's really frustrating. But I think that honestly, it just communication and clear, intentional communication can really break the entire wall completely.
Excellent. And I do see that we have a hand raised from someone in our audience. That's great. Go ahead and type your question into the Q&A or even the chat panel if you'd like. We are unable to mute lines for this program. So go ahead and type in your question and we'll make sure that that gets addressed
Yeah.
for those that have raised their hands. And
Anything,
yeah.
anything about your employees, yes, but your kids too. Like my favorite questions are always about how do I connect with my children? Like this Gen Z, I just can't figure it out. We've brought them in, I don't understand. So if you have anything there as well, I'm always happy to chat about that too.
Well, tell us, how do we apply what you've taught us today to our kids at home?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind with that is I've had somebody say that the technology piece is really interesting to them. My kid is always at home, always on the couch, always like zoomed in to their cell phone. They're doing this, they're stuck. I can't see them. I don't know what's going on. And it can be really frustrating because as I was going to say an employer, but as a parent, as somebody who loves that human, you want so desperately to be in their world. But part of their world isn't here. And so while it's important to understand that, yes, they may not be existing completely in the world that you live in, you also have the power to exist in the one that they are in. And so I showed my TikTok, for example. This is something, it's not my favorite social media. I don't love it. LinkedIn actually is my favorite. I think it's so much fun. But TikTok I created with the purpose of, okay, I can connect with a community of people. I can give them information. Like I said, this is my favorite thing to do. Give them information that can help them make the best decisions for them in those moments, right? So I do stuff like how to find a job, how to dress for work, how to call in sick, how to ask for a raise, all of these very basic fundamental questions. And for a while, I was trying really hard to grow a community in this so that I could start to promote my book. And for a while, it was taking 5 hours a week, at least 6, 7 hours a week. And I was giving it all of this time and effort. And my family around me was like, okay, well, what are we doing here? And I was like, well, this is what I'm doing. Why don't I get you guys TikToks? Why don't I show you what's going on so you can come and be a part of what I'm experiencing? And it allowed them to come into this world that was completely separate from what they understood. And so sometimes, specifically with our kids, we can go, oh, I'm so mad at you because you're just still doing this and you just won't get off your phone. But it can also just be as simple as saying, what are you doing? So let me read here. How do you address the sense need of immediate gratification? I feel like the technology has hindered the ability to expect growth, grace, and time in training and development. That's such a good question. So I would first say, based on tech, one of the things that's really important here to understand is that if your technology is not functioning at the rate that your Gen Z's brain is working, it's going to be really hard for them to function. So technology, right? We talked about this. I think it was 72 or 92%. You'll have the slides later of Gen Z's that will make their decision about where they're going to go based on the technology at a company. For sure, it was 72. But sometimes that means, okay, is it a Mac? Is it a PC? But sometimes it means, what's the software that's inside of it? Is it 10 years old? Is it running like a dinosaur? Is it really functioning slowly? Is it challenging to work through and troubleshoot some of these problems? So yes, sometimes you're going to talk about that kind of tech piece, and it's going to be the gamification side of things, which is going to make it easy for them to have that piece of oh gosh, the question is gone and I can no longer find it. But that piece of
I'm sorry, Hannah. I dropped it in the answered section if you if
You're
you want
good.
to take a look at it over there. Okay.
You're good. That gamification piece though, that satisfies that piece of like the lack of grace, their edginess to kind of conceive and move forward. So you can kind of work through that. But we'll move into the next one. And if I haven't answered that properly for you, feel free to reach out and message me. I'm happy to go through it. What are Gen Zs doing on their phone 45 hours a day? That is blowing my mind. Absolutely. So I probably spend on my phone at least 10 hours a day. And what happens is I wake up in the morning, I immediately go through my emails. I immediately go through all of my social medias. And then as soon as I'm done doing that, I turn some sort of entertainment on. See, Generation Z, we've been raised as an entertained generation. We're not very good at sitting and pondering in thought. So oftentimes we will do something. And if you have to hop for time and you haven't gotten one of your questions answered, feel free to message me. I'm happy to go through it. But so if we're not entertained by something, we're going to kind of struggle with whatever is going on. So often through a day, we'll be listening to music, we'll be listening to a podcast, we'll be listening to Netflix, whatever that is, and we're gaining all of those hours. It's not that we're looking at our phones 45 hours a day, but it's that our phones are functioning and being used 45 hours a day. As a parent of two Gen Z children who recently graduated college, what advice would you give to help them work through the challenges and stress that they are feeling due to debt, recession, and etc.? Understand, this is not the experience that you have had, even if it's so hard because as humans, we like to sympathize. We like to use our own experiences to stand next to them and say, I'm so sorry, I know what you're going through. But a lot of Gen Zs are rubbed a little bit the wrong way by that statement right now. And most kids typically are rubbed the wrong way by that statement, which is why I wrote that book for my kids. So they couldn't say that to me. Like, Mom, you don't know what's going on right now. You're 45 or whatever I'll be when they get to be that age. But so we want to stand by them. We want to say, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. And how can I help you? And what's the best thing I can do to support you? And that's always going to be, I mean, that's very generically going to be a really good way to support them. And then something that my parents did for me, just like straight up experience from what they did for me that was really nice, is as soon as I turned 18 and graduated high school, if I was living at home, I was paying rent because it is the way that the world works, and every parent is completely different. And how you choose to do this with your kids is so separate. But they took the money that I was giving them and then they saved it and they supported me to invest in something else. And so that by the time that I turned 24, 25, I was used to, by nearly 10 years, paying rent and understanding the value of what living really looked like. So sometimes Gen Zs right now, because of the way that the recession has hit, they will never in their minds be able to afford a home. And so they're spending a lot more money on luxury items so that they can make themselves feel better in the moment. And they're not saving as much for the crazy things down the road because they don't necessarily think that they'll ever get there. So if you can kind of like, yes, stand next to them, so sorry for what you're going through, but also make that shift and that pivot from luxury to necessity that they will get to one day. They just don't have that longevity. They don't know what that looks like quite yet. So we'll move on. My last Gen Z employee was not hardware literate and had a lot of trouble following spoken direction. Typical or something specific? Absolutely, makes lots of sense. So Generation Z, based on the way that their education went, they had a lot of information that they were meant to learn in front of them and then digest themselves and then create output on. They did not have as much verbal communication for direction. So there wasn't as much, I'm standing in front of the class as a teacher, and I know I was a teacher for a little while. There's not as much of that going on, specifically because of the pandemic and the way that that happened and changed the way that the education system works. So much more of it is self-driven. So they want to hear the instruction up front. They want to see the instruction. They need to feel the instruction. They want the opportunity to step back and say, let me figure out how to do this myself and learn it myself. But then they want to know that you're there to also come back to and use as support. But they are very self-motivated and self-driven compared to other generations. I wanted to get your advice on a matter regarding workplace culture. I've noticed that there might be some differing perspectives on topics like sexual fluidity within our team, particularly given that some colleagues hold more traditional views. I've committed to fostering an inclusive and respectful environment, and I want to ensure that any conversations or um, initiatives I introduced are approached in a way that's sensitive to everybody's comfort levels. Could you provide some guidance on how to best navigate this topic without causing any discomfort or misunderstanding? Chris, such a good question. Thank you so much for asking. Not an easy thing to do. I would say, gosh, let me think about this for a second. That is a really hard one because when you're working with multiple different generations, it can be really challenging to have this hour and 14-minute conversation and put it into a small thing. So honestly, reach out to me. I'd love to come and talk to all of them. Make me the bad guy so you don't have to be. That's my biggest suggestion. But if that's not on the playlist, if you can't do that, I would say um, taking the wall analogy, the brick analogy has been really, really helpful for a lot of people. Okay, I appreciate what you've seen in the past. I appreciate this, that this was the work experience you have had. I appreciate that this was the work culture that you've experienced for the last 5 decades. However, I need you to understand that this is going on with the current generation. And with 27% of them coming into the workforce, it's not going to not affect us. And so I would kind of preface this, and then I would start with a question. What do you guys suggest that we do? And I would give it back to them and say, this is the problem. What do you think we should do? I have a couple solutions, happy to give them to you. And you can make that statement, but give it back to them first. Oh, here's a message from Emily. She's the VIP.
Just letting everyone know that you are going a couple minutes over because you've been so gracious to answer all the questions. So giving everyone a heads up
Fantastic.
that we're
Yeah.
going a minute over. So yeah,
If you have to hop, but I'll keep going. So, Brooke's question, working with the generational shift from living to work to working to live, how can we adapt to this in the staffing industry that can sometimes be demanding? Oh, so demanding compared to the other industries. That's such a good question. So, we talk a lot about the concept of fullness at the Better Together group. And please steal this, use this. It's so great. Because specifically in staffing, it can be so hard to be like, I need you to come to work from Monday to Friday, from 8 to 5, but then I also need you to show up at 7 when the second shift starts. But I would also love if you wouldn't mind leaving your phone on for 3 a.m. when the third shift starts, because that's the way that it works, right? And so we talk a lot about, yes, you're coming into a salary position. I need to help you understand what that means to be a salary employee. But also, as your employer, I'm going to understand that you have doctor's appointments and dentist appointments. And sometimes your dog will bark in our meeting because you're a human. And sometimes the mail person is going to come to the door because you're a human. And when your fullness is not as full as it has always been, that is okay. But I'm still going to ask you to show up with your fullest every single day. And so if I'm coming with my fullness, everything that I have got, I can do this, yes. And then when it ends, I step away and the day is over. But that allows us to say, yes, yes, I want you to live your life. You are a human. We work to live, we live to work. But also, there are things and responsibilities that need to be taken. So give your all, whatever that may look like, and let the chips kind of fall. And in the way that they fall, you'll be able to see what type of employee you have and whether or not that's going to be something that's going to work in staffing or not. Because honestly, staffing is not for everybody. You know, we didn't have 100% of our Gen Zs come and finish our first semester because it wasn't for everybody. And sometimes that's hard. So, but that's all the questions. Thank you guys so much for asking them and for joining today. It was so fun.
yes, yes. Thank you so much, Hannah. I agree with what you just said. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Do you have any closing remarks? Anything else you want to add as a parting word of wisdom? That's all right. You've said plenty. I know we have a
Connect with
very
me.
gracious audience. So
Connect.
connect with Hannah. Please do. I'll make sure that her LinkedIn is sent out in our post event email as well as the resources. that she shared during today's program. So just a couple reminders as we close out. Information about earning CE hours is here on your screen. Don't forget, if you're interested in any of our Pro Stacks, there is a discount code for everyone who attended today's program. And then, of course, as you exit today, we'll automatically be directing you to a survey. Please take a moment to fill in your response. We do read all of your responses and take them into consideration when planning all of our future programming, and we will share your feedback with Hannah as well. So that does conclude our program today. Thank you all so much for joining us, and see you at the next webinar. Thank you.